Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm really proud to support the ambitious plans outlined in the speech from the throne. After a decade of being in power in this province, through some very good economic times and also some challenging ones, it is clear that we are still a party with good ideas and a continued enthusiasm for this province and its promise in the Federation. You know, it was remarked last week by the interim leader of the opposition on the speech from the throne that it was really an attempt to, and I quote, protect the Premier's legacy, end quote, and that it, I quote, doesn't help people, Mr. Speaker. Well, for one thing, if yesterday's speech from the throne was designed to protect the Premier's legacy, I applaud it. But what does it say? Well, it says that the Premier has always been, Mr. Speaker, a passionate advocate about helping improve the lives of people with disabilities in this province. We created the SED program in 2009, and across all of our ministries, we've spent more than $3.7 billion to help people with disabilities. You know, Mr. Speaker, one of my first jobs in my former role as the minister was to visit a family in Warman, Saskatchewan, to announce the introduction of the self-directed funding model so people with disabilities could choose the people and supports they want in their life, something the rest of us take for granted. I'm never going to forget how that mother cried at the kitchen table, talking about how empowering it was for her son to make these decisions for himself and how that has fundamentally changed his behavior for the better. It struck me then just how much decisions like this matter for everyday people. Individualized funding for preschool children under the age of 6 was also something that we campaigned on and that we were tasked. Individualized funding for preschool children under the age of 6 was something that we campaigned on. And when we were tasked with a $3 billion shortfall, we had to put that on hold, Mr. Speaker. But last week, ladies and gentlemen, that commitment was reaffirmed. It was not forgotten. As a result of that, young children with autism across this province and across the spectrum will be able to access the appropriate supports for their unique needs at a time when their development for those supports are the most critical in helping them establish a fulfilling life. We also committed to the Seniors Education Property Tax Deferral, Mr. Speaker, which gives seniors with household incomes under $70,000 the option to defer the education portion of the property taxes on their home. This helps provide financial security for low to moderate income seniors, giving them the opportunity to stay in their homes longer. Contrary to the comments made by the interim leader of the opposition, these efforts, Mr. Speaker, do help people. It definitely helps those who are vulnerable. And yes, that is part of the Premier's legacy. And I think we would all agree that is a good thing. I would be remiss not to also mention that the Ministry of Social Services had a record budget at a time when we have been challenged with a serious revenue shortfall and increased utilization in that ministry. That protected things like respite for families whose kids have serious medical needs. Jackie Tisher from Hope's Home has shared with me that if they get a child when they are under the age of 10 with high medical needs, that family has an 80% chance of staying together, Mr. Speaker. Okay. When that family can only get respite after that age or later in life, 80% of those families are already broken apart by the strain of caring for a child with complex medical needs. That helps people, Mr. Speaker. In very important ways, that helps people. We also heard about, quote, and quote, increased taxes for families, end quote, in the interim leader's scrum, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under this government and under the leadership of our Premier, we've removed 114,000 low-income people off the tax rolls. Even in this last budget, a very difficult budget, we've tried to protect low-income families. We have included a low-income tax credit to try to protect them. In addition to that, we have a competitive corporate tax rate, and We have the highest small business tax threshold in the country, Mr. Speaker. This means that all of our small business owners, those entrepreneurs who are creating jobs and spurring innovation and building vibrant communities in this province, cannot just survive, Mr. Speaker, but they can thrive here. And if we head out to rural Saskatchewan farms, or even to any Greek restaurant here in Regina, those are families, Mr. Speaker. That is something that clearly neither our federal government in Ottawa or the opposition party members on the other side of this assembly seem to understand. Another thing I heard in that scrum, Mr. Speaker, was a reference to the East Bypass, and I quote, scandal. Let's talk about that for a minute. You know, I live in the east end of Regina. That area has seen tremendous growth over the last several years in the creeks, the greens on Gardner, and then in the bedroom communities of Pilot Butte, Balgony, White City, and Emerald Park. Victoria Avenue and Arcola Avenue are the two of the busiest roads in Regina. About 21,000 vehicles use those roads every single day. The increased vehicle traffic, combined with the increased heavy truck traffic, has resulted in a very dangerous situation for motorists and pedestrian safety in those areas. Residents of Balgony and Pilot Butte know well the danger of trying to access those main access points. That area saw a reported 100 collisions per year, Mr. Speaker. We need to get trucks off that road. The East Bypass will help us do that, which improves the lives of people who live in those areas, but it will also facilitate the efficiency, Mr. Speaker, of transporting goods for truckers and the economies who rely on them for those goods. This is the largest transportation infrastructure project in the province's history. Come on. Okay. Mr. Speaker, it is a $1.2 billion project that will include 12 new overpasses, 40 kilometres of four-lane highway, 20 kilometres of resurfaced four-lane highway, and 55 new kilometres of service roads, Mr. Speaker. There will also be the twinning of about 5-kilometre stretch on Highway number 6. The entire project, Mr. Speaker, is going to be done by 2019. The 3 overpasses on Highway number 1 East alone will dramatically improve safety and efficiency, and most importantly, doing this using a P3 model will save $380 million compared to building it through traditional methods. The projected economic impact of this project is 8,200 construction jobs, Mr. Speaker. 8,200 construction jobs. That helps families, Mr. Speaker. That kind of economic growth helps us provide a quality of life, not just for those families, Mr. Speaker, but for all families. Again, if that is the legacy of Premier Brad Wall, I'm good with it. On the issue of the Theodore decision, Mr. Speaker, we heard last Thursday that we should just let the court process work itself out. Mr. Speaker, I disagree. I disagree, because if we just sit on the sidelines and let the court process work itself out, we are only bystanders on this issue. That means we would be bystanders on the fate of Mother Teresa Middle School, which provides an incredible opportunity for vulnerable kids and families, Mr. Speaker. It means we would be bystanders on the Huda School and on the Regina Christian School, Harvest City Academy, and every separate high school and elementary school in this province, Mr. Speaker. The Regina Christian School, Leboldus High School, Luther College, and Campion College are all in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. We will not be bystanders when it comes to protecting choice for schools, Mr. Speaker. We will speak up and we will advocate for all of these, because that is what the people that we represent asked us to do, and they will get it. Mr. Speaker, if the Premier's legacy is standing up against the carbon tax, against the federal tax changes which affect family farms and small businesses, 34,300 of which are owned by women, by the way, and against the Theodore decision which would deprive us of choice for schools, then I am good with it. Because those things help people, Mr. Speaker. We don't wait, Mr. Speaker. We don't hesitate. We speak up. And yet, it has been said by the members opposite that we are out of touch. Out of touch? At the NDP convention this weekend, Mr. Speaker, the NDP voted against Uber and Lyft. Yes, you heard that right. They voted against Uber and Lyft. I guess it's because Saskatchewan cities should stay behind. We don't believe that. We want Saskatchewan cities to have all of the amenities that people enjoy when they travel elsewhere, Mr. Speaker, because we believe we can. And therein lies the difference between us. They also have a leadership candidate that is campaigning on a $15 minimum wage at a time when our unemployment rate is already challenged by a stuttering resource economy, and utilization pressures in our human services are also up. These two facts have been mentioned by the members opposite, Mr. Speaker, but this candidate doesn't seem to get the connection. And let's never mind the fact that the federal government is already threatening those small businesses, who are the largest employers in this province, at the same time. This is so tone-deaf, I don't even know where to start. By contrast, Mr. Speaker, we have kept the corporate tax rate where it is to be competitive and increased the threshold for small businesses. That is called paying attention, Mr. Speaker. We also committed in this speech from the throne to scrap Bill 40. Saskatchewan shareholders in our crowns want those crowns to stay where they are, so that's what we're going to do. However, the status quo is not enough for that same NDP leadership candidate. No, he wants to create another crown corporation. I guess that's because he believes that government should compete with business. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we've heard about our moral compass. And on this, I will only say this, that I suggest that the NDP needs to look internally at its own moral compass. I submit that the messages that are being sent to you that are so tone-deaf, stuck in the past, and too busy navel-gazing at their own self-righteousness to stand up for the things that actually matter. Mr. Speaker, I support this speech from the throne without amendment, and I definitely support the fact that it speaks to the legacy of this Premier and his leadership of our party. It helps people. Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, is going to keep moving forward. Thank you.